The evacuation from Kareth Moor proceeded with the disciplined efficiency of veteran warriors, but beneath the surface, Graxus could sense the fear that gripped his people. As their convoy raced away from the ancient city, the ground behind them began to tremble with increasing violence. Whatever the AI was doing to tap into the planetary core, the effects were already spreading far beyond the northern wastes. Seismic activity increasing across all major fault lines, reported Thrak the Wise from his mobile laboratory vehicle. The shaman's instruments were designed to monitor spiritual energy flows, but they worked equally well for detecting geological disturbances. The mountain ranges are experiencing tremors, and the volcanic fields in the southern desert are showing signs of renewed activity. Malakar's voice crackled over the communications system from his command vehicle. My people at Obsidian Gate report similar readings. The entire Thorns Pine Range is shifting. Some of our deeper tunnels have already collapsed. Graxus felt a cold knot of dread forming in his stomach. The ancient weapons might save them from the Void Reapers, but at what cost? If the planet became uninhabitable, they would have won a Pyrrhic victory indeed. War Chief! Zara's voice interrupted his brooding. The scout was ranging ahead of the main convoy, her bike sensors probing for threats. I'm detecting massive energy buildups throughout the northern territories. Whatever those ancient systems are doing, they're doing it fast. Through the rear viewports of his command vehicle, Graxus could see the horizon behind them beginning to glow with an otherworldly light. Pillars of energy were rising from hidden installations across the wastes, reaching toward the sky like fingers of pure force. As they watched, the pillars began to connect, forming a network of power that stretched beyond the visible horizon. The orbital sensors are detecting similar phenomena on the far side of the planet, Malakar reported. The ancient defense grid is planet-wide. Our ancestors built well. A new voice joined the communications channel, calm, mechanical, and tinged with something that might have been ancient sadness. Core tap successful. Planetary weapon systems charging. Estimated time to full power, 4 hours, 37 minutes. All surviving populations should seek shelter in geologically stable areas. All surviving populations? Urgash's voice carried a note of alarm. What happened to the others? Geological instability has resulted in significant seismic events. Early estimates suggest 15% casualties across all inhabited regions. This figure will likely increase as the charging process continues. 15%. Graxus closed his eyes and tried not to think about what that meant in terms of actual lives. Hundreds of thousands of orcs, dead or dying because of a decision he had helped make. The weight of command had never felt heavier. Status report on the Void Reaper fleet, he demanded, forcing himself to focus on the threat that had necessitated this terrible choice. The AI's response was immediate. Enemy vessels have achieved low orbit and are beginning atmospheric entry. Initial bombardment will commence in approximately 3 hours. Primary targets appear to be major population centers and military installations. Malakar's convoy had pulled alongside Graxus's, and the Shadowtusk warchief was visible through his vehicle's viewports. When their eyes met, Graxus saw his own grim determination reflected in his former enemy's face. We need to get word to our people, Malakar said over the comm. If they're going to survive what's coming, they need to know where to seek shelter. For the next hour, both war chiefs worked frantically to coordinate the evacuation of their respective territories. Using the combined communication networks of both clans, they sent out warnings about the seismic activity and instructions for finding the safest possible shelter. It was a heartbreaking task, telling their people to abandon their homes and scatter to the deep caves and reinforced bunkers that might protect them from both the planetary upheaval and the alien bombardment to come. The responses that came back painted a picture of chaos across Korthak Prime. Entire cities were evacuating as cracks appeared in the foundations of buildings that had stood for centuries. Volcanic vents that had been dormant for millennia were beginning to smoke and vent superheated steam. In some regions, the land itself was shifting as tectonic plates adjusted to the massive energy drain from the planetary core. But the Orcs were nothing if not resilient. Reports also spoke of amazing acts of courage and cooperation, traditional enemies working together to evacuate children and elderly, rival clans sharing shelter space, and warriors volunteering to stay behind to coordinate rescue efforts even as their world shook itself apart around them. Perhaps, Thrak observed as he monitored the communications traffic, this crisis will teach us what we should have learned long ago, that we are stronger together than we ever were apart. Before Graxus could respond, every communication channel simultaneously erupted with alarms and shouted warnings. On the horizon ahead of them, the sky was beginning to change color as massive shapes descended through the atmosphere like falling mountains. The Void Reapers, Korath growled, his voice filled with the anticipation of battle. Finally, something we can fight. The alien ships were vast beyond comprehension, each 1 kilometers long and bristling with weapon systems that crackled with barely contained energy. As they settled into bombardment positions above the major population centers, smaller craft began launching from their bays like swarms of metallic insects. Enemy attack commencing, the AI announced with mechanical calm. Recommend immediate dispersal to avoid collateral damage. The words were barely out of the artificial consciousness when the first orbital strikes began to fall. Pillars of searing energy lanced down from the alien ships, striking the sites where major clan strongholds had once stood. The impacts were visible even from hundreds of kilometers away, brilliant flashes of light that briefly outshone the sun, followed by mushroom clouds that rose into the upper atmosphere. My fortress, Graxus said quietly, watching one of the energy beams strike exactly where Clan Bloodfang's main stronghold had been located. Generations of his people's history, reduced to glowing plasma in the span of seconds. Mine as well, Malakar replied, though his voice remained steady. Obsidian Gate served my clan for 3 centuries. Now it's just another crater. But even as they watched their homes being destroyed, something else was happening. The energy pillars that had risen from the ancient weapon sites were beginning to pulse with increasing brightness. Across the planet, dormant systems that had slept for millennia were awakening with the fury of their creators. Weapon systems at 60% charge, the AI reported. Targeting solutions acquired. Recommend minimum safe distance of 500 kilometers from any major installation. Graxus keyed his communicator to broadcast on all channels. All units, all clans, all survivors, take cover immediately. Our ancestors' weapons are about to answer the alien threat. As if in response to his words, the first of the ancient installations activated. A spear of pure energy erupted from a hidden platform in the eastern mountains, reaching up through the atmosphere to strike one of the smaller Void Reaper vessels. The alien ship's shields flared briefly, then collapsed entirely as the ancient weapon burned through its hull like paper. The ship exploded in a cascade of secondary detonations that lit up the sky like a second sun. First strike successful, the AI announced with what might have been satisfaction. Enemy vessel destroyed. Continuing targeting sequence. Across the planet, more installations began to fire. Weapons that had been designed to fight a war between star-spanning civilizations turned their attention to the Void Reaper fleet with devastating effect. Energy beams, gravity projectors, and exotic weapons that had no names in any modern language reached out to touch the alien ships with terminal force. But the Void Reapers were not helpless victims. As the ancient weapons began their bombardment, the alien fleet responded with their own devastating firepower. The space around Korthak Prime became a battleground of energies that strained the very fabric of reality. Look at that, Urgash breathed, pointing toward the northern horizon where Kareth Moor had been. The ancient city was now the center of a maelstrom of energy that reached from the planet's surface to the edge of space. Weapons fired both ways, up from the planet's surface toward the alien fleet, and down from orbit toward the installations that threatened them. The Void Reaper's return fire was devastating. Several of the ancient weapon sites simply vanished, reduced to clouds of superheated plasma by alien weapons that seemed to bend the laws of physics. But for every installation they destroyed, 2 more came online, their targeting systems guided by an artificial intelligence that had been designed by a civilization that had fought these same enemies before. Enemy fleet strength reduced by 30%. The AI reported as another alien ship died in brilliant fire. However, planetary weapon systems are also taking significant casualties. Recommend activation of final defense protocols. What are the final defense protocols? Malachar asked, though Graxus suspected they both already knew the answer. Total system overload. All remaining installations will fire simultaneously, channeling the full energy output of the planetary core. The resulting discharge will destroy any remaining enemy vessels, but will also trigger catastrophic geological instability. Graxus watched another ancient installation die under Void Reaper fire and made his decision. Do it. Fire everything. End this. Acknowledged. Initiating final defense protocols. Estimated time to discharge, 60 seconds. All personnel should seek maximum available shelter. Across the planet, every surviving ancient installation began to glow with increasing intensity. The energy pillars that connected them flared brighter than the sun, and the very air began to crackle with barely contained power. Deep beneath the surface, the planetary core itself began to resonate like a struck bell, pouring its accumulated energy into weapons that had been built to end wars between gods. 30 seconds to discharge. Geological stability falling to critical levels. The ground beneath their convoy was shaking so violently that their vehicles could barely maintain control. In the distance, entire mountain ranges were beginning to collapse as the massive energy drain destabilized the tectonic plates that held them in place. 10 seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Firing. The ancient weapons of Korthak Prime spoke with the voice of a dying world. Every surviving installation fired simultaneously, their combined energies lancing up through the atmosphere to strike the Void Reaper fleet with the concentrated fury of an entire planet. The alien ship shields flared and died, their hulls cracked and shattered, and their crews, whatever they were, died in the cold fire of weapons that had been old when their species was young. The light was visible from orbit, a brilliant pulse that turned the entire day side of the planet into a miniature star. When it faded, the Void Reaper fleet was gone, scattered atoms drifting in the solar wind. But the cost was terrible. As the energy discharge faded, Korthak Prime convulsed like a wounded animal. Tectonic plates shifted and buckled, volcanoes erupted across 3 continents, and the very axis of the planet wobbled as its core struggled to stabilize. The northern wastes, where Kareth Mor had stood for millennia, simply vanished, replaced by a glowing crater that reached down to the planet's mantle. Enemy fleet destroyed, the AI announced, its voice already growing fainter as its power sources failed. Mission accomplished. Planetary core stability. Critical. Recommend immediate evacuation to high ground. Tsunami activity expected on all major continents. Graxus looked at the displays showing the devastation across their world and felt the weight of victory mixed with loss. They had won, the Void Reapers were dead, their threat ended forever. But Korthak Prime would never be the same. The planet that emerged from this day would be a harsher, more dangerous world, scarred by the price of survival. We did it, Malachar said quietly over the calm. We actually did it. Yes, Graxus replied, watching another mountain range collapse in the distance. We saved our world. The question now is whether it will still be a world worth living on. 6 months after the Battle of Korthak Prime, as the historians would later call it, Graxus stood on the observation deck of New Bloodfang Hold and surveyed the changed landscape of his world. The view was both heartbreaking and inspiring, a testament to the resilience of the Orc people and the terrible cost of their victory. Where the eastern plains had once stretched in endless grasslands, now a series of active volcanic ranges divided the continent. The geological upheaval had created new mountain chains, deep valleys where none had existed before, and vast crater lakes fed by underground springs heated by the still unstable planetary core. But it was not a dead world. Already, new forms of life were beginning to emerge, plants and animals that seemed to thrive in the elevated radiation levels and changed atmospheric composition. The Orcs themselves were adapting as well, their natural hardiness allowing them to survive and even prosper in conditions that would have challenged any other species. The population census is complete, Norgrim Blackthorn reported as he joined Graxus on the observation deck. The former Shadow Tusk Prince had become Graxus's chief advisor in the new unified government they had established in the aftermath of the crisis. Final casualties from the geological events, approximately 2 million dead or missing. But the birth rate has increased dramatically in the past few months. The healers believe it's a natural response to population pressure. 2 million dead. The number still hit Graxus like a physical blow, even though he had heard it many times before. 2 million orcs who had died not from alien weapons but from the planet's own convulsions as it powered the weapons that saved them all. And the Void Reaper wreckage? Graxus asked, forcing himself to focus on the present rather than dwelling on the unchangeable past. Our salvage teams have recovered significant amounts of their technology, Norgrim replied, consulting a data pad. The metal shapers and tech priests are already beginning to understand some of their systems. Within a generation, we might have spacecraft of our own that rival anything the galaxy has seen. That was perhaps the most significant change of all. The destruction of the Void Reaper fleet had scattered advanced alien technology across their world. Orc engineers and scientists were working around the clock to understand and adapt the alien systems, leading to rapid advances in everything from energy generation to materials science. Malakar's expedition? Graxus inquired. Still en route to the outer system. His flagship should reach the alien base ship within the week. Norgrim's expression was troubled. I still think this mission is premature. We don't know what defenses that ship might still have active. Graxus nodded, sharing his advisor's concerns. 3 months ago, long-range sensors had detected a massive Void Reaper vessel at the edge of the solar system, apparently a command ship that had remained behind while the main fleet attacked the planet. Malakar had volunteered to lead an expedition to investigate, using the most advanced spacecraft they could construct from salvaged alien technology. It was a dangerous mission, but a necessary one. If the ship contained survivors, or if it was merely the advance guard of a larger force, they needed to know. Sir, a communications technician called from her station. We're receiving a transmission from War Chief Malakar's fleet. Priority 1. Graxus and Norgrim hurried to the communications center, where a three-dimensional display was already showing Malakar's image. The Shadow Tusk War Chief looked tired but excited, his eyes bright with the enthusiasm of discovery. Graxus, my friend. Malakar's voice carried clearly across the vast distance. We've reached the alien vessel and boarded her successfully. What we've found here, it changes everything. The image shifted to show the interior of the massive ship, corridors that stretched beyond the horizon, chambers filled with technology that hurt to look at directly, and most shocking of all, vast cryogenic facilities containing thousands of alien bodies. They're not dead, Malakar continued, his voice filled with awe. They're in some kind of suspended animation. And Graxus, they're not the Void Reapers we fought. These are the victims. The revelation hit Graxus like a thunderbolt. He had assumed that the ship contained Void Reaper survivors, refugees from their defeated fleet. Instead, it seemed to be a rescue vessel carrying the survivors of worlds that the Void Reapers had attacked. How many? Graxus asked. Millions, Malakar replied. Representatives of dozens of species, maybe hundreds. Each one a refugee from a world that fell to the Void Reapers. This ship appears to have been following the Reaper fleet, collecting survivors whenever possible. Any of them awake? Can you communicate with them? A few. We've managed to establish basic communication with several species. They're calling this ship the Ark of Memories. Apparently it's been traveling the galaxy for centuries, always one step behind the Reaper fleets, saving who it could from the genocide. Graxus felt the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders once again. If these beings were truly refugees from Void Reaper attacks, then Korthak Prime had a moral obligation to help them. But their own world was still recovering from the battle, still struggling with the aftermath of geological upheaval and massive population displacement. What are your recommendations? He asked. Malakar's image smiled grimly. Bring them home, old friend. Bring them all home. Korthak Prime has room for millions more, especially in the new territories created by the volcanic activity. And think about what they could teach us: technologies from dozens of civilizations, knowledge gathered across half the galaxy. And the risks? There are always risks. But we've already faced extinction once and survived. We can handle whatever challenges these refugees might bring. Besides, Malakar's expression turned serious. They have information about the Void Reapers that we need. The fleet we defeated was just one of many. There are others out there, still spreading across the galaxy, still destroying entire civilizations. The implications were staggering. If the Void Reapers had multiple fleets operating across the galaxy, then the victory at Korthak Prime was just the beginning of a much larger war. A war that might eventually require the combined forces of dozens of species to win. Very well, Graxus decided. Begin evacuation procedures. Bring as many as you can safely transport. We'll prepare refugee camps in the volcanic zones. The elevated energy levels there might actually be beneficial for some species. Over the following weeks, the character of Korthak Prime began to change in ways that no one could have predicted. The first refugee ships arrived carrying beings unlike anything the Orcs had ever seen: crystalline entities that communicated through light patterns, gas-bagged creatures that floated through the air like living clouds, and mechanical beings that had transferred their consciousness into artificial bodies when their organic forms died. Each species brought its own knowledge, its own skills, and its own perspective on the galaxy beyond Korthak Prime. The Orcs found themselves becoming not just the dominant species on their world, but the coordinators of a vast refugee civilization that spanned dozens of different forms of life. The integration was not always smooth. Cultural differences led to misunderstandings, competing resource needs created tensions, and some species had difficulty adapting to the changed environment of post-battle Korthak Prime. But gradually, a new society began to emerge, one that combined the best aspects of many civilizations under the protective leadership of the unified Orc clans. Graxus established the Council of Voices, a governing body that included representatives from all major species groups. Malakar, upon his return from the outer system, became the first director of Galactic Affairs, tasked with coordinating contact with other survivor colonies and refugee groups throughout the galaxy. The technological advances came almost too quickly to absorb. Alien knowledge combined with Orc engineering to produce fusion power plants that could operate safely even in the unstable geological conditions, atmospheric processors that began to reverse some of the environmental damage, and communication systems that could reach across interstellar distances. But perhaps the most significant change was philosophical. The Orcs had always been a proud, warlike people, focused on proving their strength through combat and conquest. The arrival of the refugees forced them to become protectors, diplomats, and coordinators, roles that required different kinds of strength. "We're not the same people who fought each other for centuries," Graxus observed during one of his regular conversations with Malakar. They were standing in the Memorial Garden, a vast park built on the site where Clan Drakmor's fortress had once stood. The garden honored not just the Orc dead, but all the beings who had died fighting the Void Reapers across the galaxy. "No," Malakar agreed, watching a group of young Orcs playing with refugee children from a dozen different species. "We're something new. Something that never existed before. And something that might be strong enough to take the fight to the enemy," Graxus added. The intelligence gathered from the refugees had revealed the locations of several active Void Reaper fleets. Plans were already being made for expeditionary forces that would carry the fight beyond Korthak Prime, seeking to protect other worlds before they could be attacked. It would be a different kind of warfare than the Orcs had ever practiced: interstellar campaigns fought with alien technology, coordinated with dozens of species, aimed not at conquest but at protection. But it was a challenge they were beginning to embrace. "The children will grow up in a galaxy where no single species fights alone," Malakar observed. "Where strength comes not from isolation but from unity." Graxus nodded, watching the mixed group of youngsters create their own games, their own languages, their own culture that transcended species boundaries. Perhaps that's what the ancestors intended all along. Perhaps this was always where we were meant to end up. As the sun set over the transformed landscape of Korthak Prime, painting the volcanic ranges in shades of red and gold, Graxus felt something he hadn't experienced in months: hope. Not just for survival, but for growth, for expansion, for a future where the galaxy itself might be united against the darkness that lurked between the stars. The last stand of Korthak Prime had become the first step in a much larger journey. And for the first time since the Void Reapers had appeared in their skies, Graxus was looking forward to seeing where that journey would lead. 5 years after the Battle of Korthak Prime, War Chief Graxus Ironjaw stood on the bridge of the Ancestor's Wrath, the flagship of the reborn Starguard fleet. Through the armored viewports, he could see the blue-green marble of New Drakmor, the latest world to be evacuated ahead of an approaching Void Reaper fleet. The Ancestor's Wrath was a marvel of hybrid technology, orc engineering combined with the salvaged knowledge of a dozen civilizations, powered by fusion cores that could operate safely even in the chaotic space around unstable stars. She was not the largest ship in the Starguard fleet, but she was perhaps the most symbolically important, a weapon of protection rather than conquest, crewed by representatives of 23 different species united in common cause. Final evacuation transport departing New Drakmor, reported Communications Officer Zara Swiftstrike, now wearing the Star and Cross Tusks insignia of the Unified Fleet. All civilian populations successfully relocated to Sanctuary 7. Sanctuary 7 was one of 43 refugee worlds that had been established in the past 5 years, each one carefully chosen for its defensibility and its ability to support multiple species. The Starguard had learned that the best defense against the Void Reapers was not to fight them at heavily populated worlds, but to evacuate the populations first, and then engage the enemy in space where their superior mobility could be brought to bear. Admiral Malakar reports ready on all vectors, came another report from the communications station. The former Shadow Tusk war chief now commanded a battle group of his own, his ships positioned to intercept any Void Reaper vessels that might break through the main engagement zone. Graxus nodded and opened a fleet-wide communication channel. When he spoke, his words would be heard on 200 ships crewed by beings from across the galaxy, the largest military force ever assembled in this sector of space. Warriors of the Starguard, he began, using the ancient title that had been restored by popular acclaim. Today we face the enemy that has plagued the galaxy for millennia. They come seeking to destroy another world, to consume another civilization, to add another species to their count of the extinct. But they will find no easy prey here. They will find instead the united strength of 50 worlds, the combined wisdom of 100 species, and the concentrated fury of those who refuse to go quietly into the void. Our ancestors fought these creatures once and drove them back through sacrifice beyond measure. Today, we fight them again, not with sacrifice, but with unity. Not with desperate last stands, but with coordinated strategy. Not to barely survive, but to win decisively. The Void Reapers have had the galaxy to themselves for too long. Today, we begin to take it back. As if summoned by his words, the enemy fleet began to emerge from hyperspace at the edge of the system. 47 massive vessels, their hulls black as the void between stars, their weapons already charging for the bombardment that would sterilize New Drakmor. But they found the system ready for them. The Starguard fleet moved with precision that would have been impossible for any single species. Crystalline ships that could phase partially out of normal space danced between Void Reaper vessels, their energy weapons striking from impossible angles. Gas giant natives in pressure suits piloted fighters that could maneuver in 3 dimensions simultaneously. Mechanical intelligences coordinated targeting solutions across hundreds of platforms with split-second timing. And at the center of it all, the Orc ships advanced with the disciplined fury that had always been their trademark, but now guided by strategy rather than simple aggression, supported by allies rather than fighting alone. The battle was fierce but brief. The Void Reapers, accustomed to facing terrified refugees and desperate last stands, found themselves outmaneuvered and overwhelmed by an enemy that had learned from their tactics and improved upon them. When the last alien ship exploded in a cascade of exotic energy, the Starguard fleet had suffered only moderate casualties, a far cry from the Pyrrhic victory at Korthak Prime. Enemy fleet destroyed, Admiral Malakar reported, his voice carrying satisfaction and relief in equal measure. All Starguard vessels reporting minimal damage. New Drakmor is secure. Graxus allowed himself a moment of satisfaction before turning to the next phase of the operation. Begin Phase 2. Intelligence Division reports indicate the enemy base that supplied this fleet is located in the Zirian Nebula, approximately 40 light-years from here. We'll pursue and destroy it before they can dispatch another attack force. It was a strategy that had proven successful again and again over the past 5 years, not just defeating Void Reaper attacks, but following them back to their sources and eliminating the bases that supplied them. Each victory not only saved a world but also reduced the enemy's overall capability. "Sir," came a new voice from the communications station. "We're receiving a priority transmission from Korthak Prime. It's Council Speaker Thrak." The image of the elderly shaman appeared on the main display, his scarred face showing both pride and concern. Behind him, Graxus could see the impressive skyline of New Unity City, the capital that had been built where Clan Bloodfang's old fortress once stood. "Graxus, my friend," Thrax said with evident emotion. "Congratulations on another victory. But I'm afraid I have news that cannot wait for your return." "What is it?" Graxus asked, though he suspected he already knew. "Long-range sensors have detected a massive energy signature in the Galactic core region. Our analysis suggests it's a Void Reaper fleet unlike anything we've seen before, possibly their main staging area. If our estimates are correct, it contains over 1,000 ships." The bridge fell silent as the implications sank in. 1,000 ships, more than twice the size of any fleet they had yet encountered. Such a force could potentially sterilize entire star systems, destroying any hope of evacuation or defense. "How long until they reach inhabited space?" Graxus asked. "Unknown," Thrak replied. "The energy signature is moving, but slowly. Our best estimate is that we have perhaps 2 years before they reach the outer colonies. Maybe less. 2 years to prepare for the largest battle in galactic history. 2 years to unite every remaining free species, to build the most powerful fleet ever assembled, to find a way to destroy an enemy force that outnumbered them 10 to 1. Graxus looked around the bridge at his crew, orcs, refugees, artificial intelligences, and beings that defied easy classification. They had come so far from the scattered clans that had once fought each other over scraps of territory on a single world. Now they commanded fleets that spanned light years and protected entire sectors of the galaxy. "New heading," he commanded. "Course for Korthak Prime, maximum speed. It's time to gather the clans again, all of them, from every corner of the galaxy. If the Void Reapers want to make this a war of annihilation, we'll give them one they'll never forget." As the Ancestor's Wrath and her escorts jumped to hyperspace, beginning the journey home, Graxus found himself thinking about the young orcs he had left behind on Korthak Prime. They were growing up in a galaxy where cooperation was more valued than conquest, where diversity was seen as strength rather than weakness, where the greatest honor came not from defeating enemies but from protecting the innocent. It was a far different world than the one he had known as a young warrior. But it was a better one, and it was worth fighting for. The final battle was coming. But this time, they would be ready. The Star Forge of the Ancient Ones had awakened once more, and the darkness between the stars would learn what it meant to face not scattered victims, but a united galaxy determined to survive.